No doubt you're familiar with the concept of IQ. That's your intelligence quotient, and your IQ score tells us, relatively speaking, how bright you are, how smart you are, and you know facts and figures and things like that. Well, in the past number of years, there's been quite a bit of attention given, rightly so, to EQ, and that's your emotional quotient, or more commonly, we talk about your emotional intelligence. You know, you can have some people that are really bright in the academic sense, but they have a real low EQ, or you might have some folks that may not have all of the IQ power, but they have a very high EQ, and so that certainly impacts the way that they're going to be able to manage relationships. And obviously, a guy like me, I'm thinking, yeah, we want to get that EQ as high as we possibly can, because ultimately the way that you manage your relationships and your own emotional comportment, then that's going to go a long ways in terms of determining how strong of a relationship style you're going to have. Now, I want to talk with you today about 12 different kinds of comments that people might make when they have low EQ. And I'm doing so in this kind of direction so that you can be aware of some of the triggers that can indicate that somebody's not really managing things well from that emotional standpoint. And it might be you. It might be the person that's in front of you. But the more you're aware of this, then it can prompt you to think about the better alternatives. And there's one huge thing I want you to watch for as I go through these 12, and that is what I refer to as the covert messages. People with low EQ tend to say things on the outside when in fact there's a hidden meaning that's behind the surface that really gets to the heart of where they're coming from. So let's see if we can develop an awareness of all of that. Now, the first phrase that I want to bring out that people with low EQ might commonly say is, why can't you just? Why can't you just do things this way? Or why can't you go along with everybody? You know how you are. Or a corollary to that one might be, you're going to do what? And in that case, there's the implication that, first of all, they're not asking the question for the sake of gathering information. But in both of these instances, there's the implication that says there's something really wrong about you. And I just can't believe that you're doing certain things the way you do, and you need to do things better. You're not saying it, but that's the implication, and something like that can lead to disruption in the relationship. Or a very close second comment that we can have is, okay, if that's what you want to think. Now, it may be that you're having a discussion with someone and you don't really agree with them, and you've attempted to speak your truth into that person and they're not having it. And it's kind of like at the very end of the discussion, you just kind of throw a barb in there. Okay, that's what you want to think. And it more or less implies, I just really think that you're an idiot. And now you're not outwardly saying it, but you're setting the relationship up to fail. And that's not going to be something that's going to lead to good results. Or how about a third phrase that people with low EQ might say? And that is, hey, I had no other choice. Let's suppose that you said something that went in the wrong direction and it creates some havoc, or you did something that turned out to be a disaster. And so you explain it by saying, well, I didn't have any other choice. Now, the implication is, if there was a problem, it wasn't my fault. And so there's a tacit form of blaming and accusation towards some mysterious something out there. And that person is just simply not willing to take responsibility for themselves, as opposed to the person that has the higher EQ that would say, I was in a difficult situation and I managed it in a certain way, and here's how it played out. And I think we might need to be willing to go back and revisit that. High EQ people can actually admit, I always have choices, and sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. Or a fourth common phrase, this is very common, that a person with low EQ might say is, how do you think I'm supposed to feel? Now, somebody else may be sharing an incident with them, or a confrontation, and rather than saying, all right, I need to know more about why you feel this way, and I'd like to talk with you about my response, okay, that would involve a healthy exchange between two healthy people. Well, the person with low EQ wants to kind of put a bit of a shame on that other person. There's something really wrong with the way that you look at me. What's wrong with you? And by the way, that's another phrase that people with low EQ use. What's wrong with you? How do you suppose that makes me feel? And the implication is, I think you're just an oblivious person. A fifth phrase that's commonly used is, if you can believe that. For example, you might say, well, my sister said she was going to go and be with this person, if you can believe that. Or this person decided to do such and such activity, if you can believe that. And the implication is, I just am constantly having to come to terms with this person's idiotic kinds of ways, if you can believe that. And the implication is there's another criticism or insult that's being given to that person that they don't agree with. Now, a sixth one, and this is kind of an interesting. A person with low EQ might say something to the effect of, everything is great, right? Now, let me give you an example of what I mean there. It might be that I'll say, hey, you've got that new job. Everything's great with it, right? And when I throw that word right on the end of it, the implication is there's a certain way that I want to hear you respond. I want you to tell me that things are going well. And then if you come back and say, well, it's not all that great, then it makes you look like, well, then you're doing things wrong and you're not giving the right reaction. And so you're more of the negative kind of person. I, of course, am being positive, right? And it has a real subtle put down towards the person who might not give the correct response. Or a seventh phrase that can be very common is, well, aren't you just being sensitive? Let's suppose that you're talking about something and the other person has an emotional reaction that you don't like. Rather than saying, tell me about that, you can just kind of put that jab in there. Well, aren't you just being sensitive? And the implication is there was a certain way you were supposed to feel, and that wasn't it. And so again, you're making that other person feel rather uncomfortable. Or number 8, a person might say, nobody says that to me. Emphasis on that. Now, this is going to be coming from somebody that has a strong argumentative nature. They can disagree very readily, and they when they have somebody in front of them that offers a separate interpretation, rather than saying, I don't really think that way, help me understand how you arrived at that conclusion, which would be the high emotional intelligence way of doing things. It's like, you don't say that to me. You don't have that right. And the implication is I get to decide what you say, do, and feel around here. Or number 9, this would never have happened if you had. And then they'll go on to, we might be having a disagreement, or there might be have been a difficulty in our lives. And I might just want to just put that blame out there and say, well, this would never have happened if you had just done things the right way, or if you had listened to me, or if you had made a separate decision. Excuse me. And so as a result of that, then you can just kind of have this notion that says there's just, you're just kind of along here just to make things miserable, aren't you? And you keep doing a good job of that. This would never have happened. Or number 10, and this is just the statement of a very, very stubborn, futile kind of person, where they might just say, stop it, just stop it. Now, I know that there are times when a person can be angry or stubborn or argumentative, and sometimes you want to say something like that, and it's okay at times to say, we need to draw this to a close. But when you come off in this super strong, stop it, just stop it kind of way, particularly if you have a reputation of not wanting to discuss difficult topics, it just gives the impression that you're the kind of person that responds rashly when things go wrong. One of the things that I work hard on in my counseling office, and then also, of course, in my personal life, is I don't want to be the guy that responds in a rash way if something doesn't go right. I mean, can you imagine coming to a counselor's office and I just say, shut up, just stop it? Well, of course not. I want to establish myself as somebody that says we can talk about things in here rashly. And that's something that high EQ people can do in their personal lives as well. Or number 11, the low EQ person might say something like, that reminds me of a time when I, And so what happens is there are times when you're having a discussion with someone and they mention, let's say they went on a vacation to Florida. Well, that reminds me of a time when I went to Colorado, and you just hijack the conversation. Or if you have something or somebody's talking about, there was a disappointment with a holiday. And you say, yeah, that reminds me of a time when something like that happened in my life. And there are people with low EQ that they kind of send the message covertly that says, I don't want to listen to you. Let's talk about me. That's my favorite topic. Or 12. And this is one that can be very common with low EQ people. And that is, why should I even bother with you? And now they may be feeling a great deal of futility and hurt, but instead of saying, hey, I'm struggling here, they just kind of send the message that says covertly, you're beneath me and you need to remember that. Now, obviously, when you have low EQ, that implies that there's a low level of empathy, there's a high level of control, there's actually a fear reaction in that I don't want to have to deal with stuff that makes me feel awkward and uncomfortable. And I'm hoping that as you examine these kinds of responses, you can look at yourself and recognize, I want to be somebody that is more sensitive emotionally than that. And then when you're around people who also have that low EQ, you can have this sense of motivation that says, I can do better, and I want to be someone that offers a safe haven for people when we're in communication. So it's a good challenge that we all need to maintain. By the way, I got a guy here that's got plenty of good EQ. Oh, Gus, he's just kind of a supportive, encouraging kind of fella. He's just laying right here with his daddy, just saying, okay, Dad, speak it, say it. And he's just right there with me. I know, Gus. Gus and I would like for you to go beneath the video here and hit the subscribe button. And as you do so, then you'll be apprised of more videos that come along. There are also some tabs beneath you on the video here that will take you to some of my books and online workshops and some online counseling possibilities. And I hope you would avail yourself to those if you find those to be most useful. I'm glad that you're on the journey here with us. And just know that I am pleased that you include me in that endeavor that you're having. So thanks for being here with me, and I will see you next time.